Those stories we're following on this Friday. North Korea test-fired 7 short-range missiles into the East Sea on Thursday. This as Seoul and Washington wrap up one part of their joint annual military exercises. Korea's finance minister meets with business leaders and tells them that it's crucial to increase people's wages to an appropriate level. And the 3rd anniversary of the Korea-U.S. free trade deal taking effect is approaching. We have an in-depth analysis of the pact. Stay with us for these stories and more coming right up. Hello, you're watching Early Edition at 6. It's March 13th here in Seoul. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung.
And I'm Daniel Choy. Thank you for joining us. Well, South Korean officials say North Korean leader Kim Jong-un observed his military shoot several surface-to-air missiles into the East Sea on Thursday afternoon.
That's right. Seoul officials speculate the firing was to protest against the ongoing annual military drills between South Korea and the U.S. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports.
North Korea fired 7 surface-to-air missiles into the East Sea on Thursday afternoon. Officials say the launch is likely to have been in protest against annual joint military exercises between South Korea and the U.S. military, and that they were fired from Seondeok, South Hamgyong province. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff made the announcement on Friday, saying the missiles were SA-5s, which have a range of up to 200 kilometers, the longest in the SA missile category. One official reportedly noted that the Joint Chiefs of Staff believes North Korean leader Kim Jong-un observed the launch. This is the first time the North has fired SA-5s. The launch came a day before South Korea and the U.S. wrapped up their Key Resolve drill, the first of 2 military exercises underway this month. The 2-week computerized command post exercise involves some 10,000 South Korean and 8,600 U.S. troops and aims to enhance interoperability in all aspects of the military between Seoul and Washington in case of war. Part 2, the Full Eagle field training exercise, will run through April 24th. The drill mobilizes 200,000 troops from Seoul and Washington who perform a variety of drills on land, in the air, and at sea. Pyongyang claims the drills are a rehearsal for a northward invasion, while South Korea and the U.S. maintain they are aimed at countering possible provocations from the north. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Now, South Korea has been asking North Korea to talk about the regime's unilateral decision to increase wages for workers at the inter-Korean Kaesong Industrial Complex, with Pyongyang saying the hike was legitimate. Some observers say this could lead to another shutdown at the factory zone. Arirang's Kim has more.
Tensions are brewing over the Kaesong Industrial Complex as South Korea's offered deadline for talks over North Korea's unilateral decision to raise workers' wages at the complex expires on Friday. Last month, North Korea decided to up its workers' minimum monthly wage by 5% to $74. To this announcement, South Korea remained firm, calling on the North to come forward for discussions over wages. Seoul also said that unless the 2 sides reach an agreement, it would penalize South Korean companies complying with the wage hike. South Korean operators at Kaesong have expressed concerns that a wage increase could affect their business. But a day before the deadline, Pyongyang said the wage hike is a legitimate and normal exercise of its legislative rights, adding that it has no intention of negotiating with Seoul over its decision. Some worry the tug-of-war could lead to a shutdown similar to what happened in 2013. But others say Pyongyang has too much to lose for another halt.
North Korea is trying to get the upper hand over Seoul in regards to decisions at the Kaesong complex. It may also be trying to earn more foreign currency by enforcing the wage hike.
Since opening in 2004, the Kaesong Industrial Complex has been a symbol of inter-Korean economic cooperation and a significant source of income for the North. Experts forecast inter-Korean talks over wages at Kaesong could start once the joint South Korea-U.S. military drills wrap up in April. Kim, Arirang News.
Russia is set to hold a ceremony in May commemorating the end of World War II, but more and more Western leaders are boycotting the event, citing Moscow's involvement in the current Ukraine crisis. One of the latest leaders to join is British Prime Minister David Cameron, making North Korean leader Kim Jong-un one of the most prominent guests to attend. Here's Arirang's Hwang Sung-hee.
British Prime Minister David Cameron has joined the growing list of Western leaders boycotting Russia's Victory Day parade in May. That's according to his official spokesperson on Thursday local time, citing concerns about Russian activities in Ukraine. For that same reason, German Chancellor Angela Merkel and U.S. President Barack Obama have also said they will stay away. That makes North Korean leader Kim Jong-un one of the most prominent confirmed guests so far. Russia, finding itself shunned by the West, has been cozying up to North Korea. They have designated 2015 as a year of friendship, promising deepened political, economic, and cultural cooperation. Some remain concerned about this blossoming relationship, but others say Moscow could play a bigger role in inter-Korean relations.
Russia is aiming to use its ties with North Korea to expand economic cooperation with South Korea. That means Russia could support North Korea at multilateral talks, but it could also become the middleman in sorting out the problems.
Experts say the growing military alliance between North Korea and Russia is alarming. The two isolated states recently announced plans to conduct a series of joint Army, Navy, and Air Force exercises this year. Some also point to the possibility of Russia arming the North Korean military with advanced weaponry as a means to keep Washington busy in the region. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
Those who thought they could get away or forget about the wartime atrocities are being cornered internationally. Over in New York, participants in a UN forum are calling for stronger measures to bring those found guilty of wartime sex crimes to justice. Or Park Ji-won tells us more.
Held on the sidelines of the 59th session of the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, the forum focused on the issue of how to eradicate wartime sex crimes. Participants urged the international community to swiftly and sternly respond to ensure those responsible are brought to justice. Those among taking part are Gay McDougall, former special UN rapporteur on the issue of systematic rape and sexual slavery practices in armed conflict. McDougall called on world leaders to show a determination to resolve the issue and suggested the UN offer diverse opportunities to active individuals and civic groups for the cause of women's rights.
There must be an end to impunity for these crimes, whether committed by government forces, non-state actors, or international peacekeeping forces.
Korea's Gender Equality Ministry sponsored the forum to raise awareness about Japan's wartime atrocities, including its sexual enslavement of tens of thousands of Asian women, mostly from Korea, China, and the Philippines. Meanwhile, senior officials from Korea and Japan will meet next Monday for more talks aimed at resolving the long-standing issue of Japan's wartime sexual enslavement. It will be the 7th meeting of its kind, but the two sides have yet to make any substantial progress on the highly sensitive subject. Seoul has called on Tokyo to take sincere steps to compensate the Asian victims, but Japan keeps saying the matter was already settled through a bilateral treaty signed in 1965. The talks come just days ahead of the first trilateral foreign ministers meeting between Korea, China, and Japan in 3 years. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Policing and racial issues are hotly debated topics in Ferguson, and tensions are running high over there after the shooting of 2 police officers. Authorities said the shooters, still at large, pointed the barrel at his subjects simply because they were uniformed officers. The manhunt for the attacker continues, and our Son Jang-in has this story.
It was around midnight Wednesday local time when at least 3 gunshots broke out outside police headquarters in Ferguson as a group of demonstrators was beginning to disperse after a peaceful rally. The shootings left 2 police officers wounded, one in the face and the other in the shoulder. Both officers have been released after being treated at a local hospital and are expected to make a full recovery. U.S. President Barack Obama and Attorney General Eric Holder have both condemned the shooting, which Holder called an ambush, and have promised to hold the perpetrators accountable.
What happened last night was a pure ambush. This was not someone trying to bring healing to Ferguson. This was a damn punk, a punk who was trying to sow discord in an area that is trying to get its act together.
A manhunt for those responsible is ongoing. Several people have already been brought in for questioning, but no suspects have been named and no arrests made. The incident took place as demonstrators gathered at Ferguson Police Headquarters to demand changes in law enforcement practices following a scathing report by the Justice Department that found widespread racial discrimination within the city's police force and court system. Ferguson has been at the center of racial tensions in America following the shooting death of 18-year-old Michael Brown triggered nationwide demonstrations last year. 손정인, Arirang News.
Well, we're coming close to 3 years since South Korea's free trade agreement with the U.S. went into effect.
Tell us more about the trade relationship between the two countries. Since then, our Shin Se-min joins us live in the studio. Thanks for joining us, Se-min.
Good afternoon, guys.
Yes.
Since the Korea and U.S. FTA went into effect, the trade volume between the two countries has surged tremendously, stimulating also the business ties between the two. Now, put into actual figures, the trade volume between the two countries was over $115 billion last year, up more than 11% from the previous year. Now, the growth is actually larger than Korea's trade volume with other countries, which only rose by 2 percentage points in the same period. Now, looking at the chart here, the Korean exports to the U.S. have been rising since the deal went into effect, from an export volume of some $58 billion to over $70 billion last year. Now, that's a lot of numbers to digest, I know, but all of this is to say that the business exchanges between the two countries perked up, buoyed by the economic recovery in the U.S. as well.
Right, very, very promising signs for the business between the two countries. But of course, what about the weakening yen? How is it affecting the Korean exports?
Right, Korea's main rival in the global economy, the Japanese market, had been shipping a lot of products with cheaper price tags. But even with those products entering the global economy, the market share of Korean products increased to 3% in the U.S. domestic markets. So it may not seem like a lot, but the experts say that the fact that it increased when other products were cheaper means that Korean products prove that their price competitiveness was actually getting stronger. And this is also partly due to a rise in the FTA utilization rate between Seoul and Washington, which was over 76%, up 7% from the average with other nations with FTA.
I may be wrong here, but I still hear many people saying that some of the items are still too pricey, for example, like oranges and cherries. So what's going on there?
Yes, you're right, but let me just put this out first. Korean consumers were able to enjoy some of the cheaper lobsters from America these days, but it's hard for consumers like you and I to feel the price drop in other products, such as, like you've mentioned, cherries, lemons, and oranges. It's quite a skewed equation if you look at it, especially for agricultural goods, as Korea has been importing larger amounts of such products since the deal went into effect. And experts say that it's one of the issues that still needs to be resolved.
The distribution channel for agricultural goods is to blame for pricey U.S. produce. The distribution system for such produce is much weaker than that for industrial products. So unless cherries or lemons are things that every Korean consumes on a daily basis, the import volume won't go up and prices will likely remain the same.
But aside from those tariff factors, the Korean agricultural sector, which was strongly against the FTA, hasn't been hit hard. Now, the worries that the influx of U.S. produce would dominate the Korean market simmered down as the FTA deals with Canada, Australia, and even EU created their own price competition upon entering the Korean market, making it more difficult for imported produce to have a monopoly.
Right, we're not going to have lobsters every meal, so I guess we're not feeling that impact yet. Well, people always hurry. We have the pali-pali mentality here in Korea, but of course, it's only been close to 3 years. That's still more or less in the beginning stages since the FDA went into effect, Semin. And I believe there are some things that can be worked out from here on. What's important is the future. What can we do to improve bilateral trade relations in the long run?
Right, in the long run, experts say that that I talked to today, specifically said that Korea-U.S. FTA setting is an example for trade agreements with other countries as well now, and Korean exporters should raise the quality of the product as we have already strengthened our position in the U.S. domestic market with prices. And this is what the expert had to say about the progress so far.
With the slowly growing global economy, demand isn't likely to stretch like it has in the past. And the U.S. economy is slowly recovering, but it's picking up speed, and that's pretty much our only hope.
Now, he added that the FTA with the U.S. can be considered as training for the shifting global trade structure, especially with the introduction of the so-called Trans-Pacific Partnership Deal, or the TPP, a pending trade pact that includes the U.S. and 11 other countries.
Right, and South Korea, of course, is looking to getting into that TPP trade circle, so we will have to wait and see how all of this will work out and unfold. In the meantime, Simon, thank you very much for coming in today and sharing your report with us.
My pleasure.
Business Park face a one-day entry ban.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best. With Laah Hyun-kyung and Daniel Choy.
Arirang News.
Arirang News. On Early Edition at 6.
Korea's finance minister met with leading business groups this Friday and urged companies to raise salaries as a way to boost sagging domestic consumption. Business leaders, however, were not too happy about that idea. Our Kim Jong-il has more.
Finance Minister Choi Kyung-an has once again called for a wage hike in order to revitalize sagging domestic consumption, which is pulling down the nation's economic recovery momentum. Choi emphasized the need for smaller subcontractors to raise minimum wage and for large conglomerates to support these subcontractors in employee payment. The finance minister, who is also the deputy prime minister, asked the business community to increase youth employment and urged companies to participate in major investment projects, as the government is willing to support long-term risk. In response, business leaders told the minister that they understand the government's commitments to revitalize the economy, but cautioned that any move to hike wages could affect their international competitiveness and undermine exports. Park Geunhye, the head of the Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry, said the minimum wage issue should be discussed in tandem with a long-term master plan, and that since Korea has a smaller domestic market than the U.S. and Japan, a hike in the minimum wage will hamper corporate competitiveness. As companies are the main source of investment and employment, the government has been pressing them to return more of their profits to workers and shareholders, with the hope it will give them extra money to spend. Stagnant wages, rising household debt, and the aging population has weighed on domestic consumption, and companies have become more reluctant to invest and give employees a wage hike. Minister Choi reaffirmed that there will be no corporate tax hikes, as such a move is expected to have negative effects on corporate investment and hurt Korea's global competitiveness. Kim Jong-il, Arirang News.
President Park asked the heads of Korea's 5 constitutional institutions to help unite the country and bring together national capacity to economically leap forward by strengthening ties with the Middle East. Talking about her recent trip to the region with the group, including the parliamentary speaker and the prime minister, she said she saw great potential in Korean firms seeking to establish themselves in the Middle East's new energy, healthcare, culture, and ICT industries. She also talked about opportunities for Korea's young people to realize their potential in those areas. It was the first time the president met the 5 leaders after an overseas trip as a means to open up lines of external communication. And at a ceremony marking the 20th anniversary of a launch of cable television in Korea, President Park Geunhye said the broadcasting industry is a comprehensive package of everything related to a creative economy. She said the industry sits at the center of a convergence of cultural arts, video arts, and information and communications, and that merging Korean culture with world-class ICT will help the cable industry become Korea's next growth engine. At the award ceremony held hours later, Arirang TV's global project, Embracing the World, received the Visual Graphic Prize. The channel identity program follows overseas viewers, of which Korea's cultural assets such as K-pop, Taekwondo, and Korean alphabet Hangul have become an important part of their lives. Question: how many books do you read a month?
That's a difficult question. I have to say, I'm embarrassed to say, maybe one in 2 months.
Well, at least you get to finish a book in 2 months. I read like 5 books for a year and never finish them.
Right. Reading more books almost never fails to make it onto the list of New Year's resolutions for many, many Koreans. But the reality is that fewer people, including myself, are picking up books these days. Arirang's Kwon So-ah has this story.
An adult literacy rate of 98%. Roughly 7 out of 10 go to university. But the average household in Korea buys fewer than 1 book a month. Somewhat ironic, but Koreans' interest in reading seems to be fading. Last year, only 5% of Koreans over 13 years old said their favorite hobby was reading. That's down from 8% in 2004.
People are just choosing to spend their money on other things. With the rising amount of academic and work-related stress, they feel the need to release that by entertaining themselves in a more active way than reading.
While spending on culture and entertainment in Korea has risen for 10 straight years, spending on books has decreased steadily for the past 4. The amount of money the average household in Korea spent on books last year slumped to a record low. Paper book sales are down, but with reading via digital devices becoming more common, there is optimism that the trend could push the nation's reading rate back up. One of Korea's major bookstores, Kyobo, has seen a big success in its 2-year e-book service history as its customers read nearly 15 books a year. But there is skepticism too.
It's hard to say the rise in e-books will reignite Korea's lost love for reading, as the majority of e-book readers are those who already are passionate readers of conventional books.
To trigger a greater passion for books in the average person, bookstore owners have started to do more than just sell books.
We try to entice customers by organizing meetings with authors or by holding literature lectures.
Experts say a key way to restore an interest in reading is to encourage people to perceive it as a hobby that can be shared with other people. For example, at book cafes that promote reading as a culture of its own. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Good evening, I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. Today turned out extremely mild compared to the last few days, and it was as if there wasn't a cool spell. Now currently we're under clear skies here in the capital due to the influence of a high pressure trough. However, Jeollanam-do and Gyeongsang-nam-do provinces will see some precipitation in the early evening hours, while Jeju Island will see sporadic rain all throughout the night. Hopefully the rain will relieve some of this dryness, because it's been quite some time with dry weather advisories and warnings, and by the looks of it, it's getting worse and expanding nationwide. But the good news is tomorrow's weather will be similar in a good way, with similar or even milder readings than today, and daytime highs ranging from 7 to 14 degrees. Now this is expected to continue all throughout the weekend for most places, except a light rain is expected on Jeju Island on Sunday. Now let's have a look at the readings for tomorrow. So we'll start off the Saturday morning at -2 and gets up high to 10 degrees, while Daegu and Busan will top at 14 and 13 degrees respectively. Moving over to other regions, Jeju Island gets up to 12 degrees, Dokdo hits 7, while Mankungang is a bit chilly at -1 degrees. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And we've come to the end of the last newscast of the week. Do have a great start to your day or a safe drive home. This has been Daniel Choy.
And I'm Laah Hyun-kyung, wishing everyone a happy weekend. See you again next week. Goodbye for now.